Hi guys, Mary Poplin from Imagineer Systems here, and today we're going to be going over the new Open Splines in 4.1.0. We're going to talk about the kinds of things that you can use with Open Splines, like stroking and keying hair for wispy additions or if you have to rebuild hair, but specifically we're going to focus on beauty work and slimming faces using the Reflex Warper by Revision Effects inside of After Effects and Nuke's Spline Warp inside of Nuke. So let's get started with Open Splines. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this shot. Now, I've already done a remove on this shot for the remainder of my beauty work. We're not going to walk you through that, but we do have to have tracks to make Open Splines work because they don't actually have track mats. So, we're going to go ahead and track her face here, and then we're going to draw a spline around her neck very quickly, and we're going to track her neck and shoulders. These are the tracks that we're going to use to hook our Open Splines up to. So we're just going to track those forwards just like that. And now we're going to just check our track. Now, to draw an open spline is pretty simple. You just draw a spline like you would normally draw any X or B spline, and then you just shift and click open, or you can open and close your splines in the spline menu by right-clicking on that. And if you can't find the menu for closing splines with a left or right click, you can use the Tools menu. We're going to continue drawing splines down her face, just going to use the same exact techniques. We're going to shift-click for an open spline, and we name our layers. Now, it's really important that we name our layers from and to in Mocha because we're actually going to be using these later inside of the Revision Effects plugin. So you must have a beginning morph section and an end morph section in order to get a good warp. Now we're going to just go ahead and open the spline just by opening the spline in our menu and make sure that we have a nice track and roto on this section of the spline. We're going to link both of these to the face track in the Layer Properties menu, so under Link to Track, and then we're going to make sure that they move properly in my shot. Now you can see I actually have a couple of things to correct inside of the roto. It's pretty fast and easy. This is actually 100% in real time so that you see how fast this is. We just select the points that we need to correct, and just like Mocha does with every other bit of roto, it cuts our time in half and it cuts our keyframe down by at least a third. In this shot, it cuts our keyframes down dramatically. It's actually really important to take the time to get nice roto for these warp shots because your warp and your beauty work is only going to be as nice as your roto is. So take the time to make sure that the spline is really stuck to the side of the face that you want to slim. In this case, we got this footage from stockfootage.com, so if you want to practice on that, you can always download footage from stockfootage.com. From here, we simply duplicate our layers and we rename them to the to layers. Because remember how I said we're going to go from to to, and that's going to be how we generate our warp? We're going to use the Uber key to offset these inside layers in order to create a warp between those two splines. So I click my Uber key on and I move my splines inward. These are my to splines, not my from splines. So these are where we're going to with the warp. So we're going to bring her cheeks in as much as possible, but we're constraining them between these two open splines. You'll see what I mean by this when we get over into After Effects, but it's actually a really powerful application of Mocha's planar tracking and open splines to warp a face. So again, here's our from and here's our to. We want to make sure that these are lined up properly and are the right length apart. This is going to be a visual check, not something that you'll be able to automatically use. Now, because I don't want to waste any more time on this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the rest of the splines that I want to make in a little bit of fast forward here. So we're just going to make her outer neck splines and link those to the neck track, and then we're going to make the inner neck splines once we've corrected all the roto, and we're going to offset those again using the Uber key. And then we're going to correct the roto so that it's never like past her chin, so that we don't get points in her chin when we do our warp instead of After Effects, because you don't want that spline to poke in and warp her chin further than what the other spline is doing. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to make an outline to contain our warp so that we don't warp the background and track that forward. It's really just that simple. It's the same as any track in Mocha. We're just going to track translation, scale, rotation, and shear because that's easiest when we're doing garbage mats. And we're just going to export all this data to After Effects, shape data, all visible layers, jump right over to After Effects, and then in After Effects we're going to import our footage. Just like every time we use Mocha, we need to make sure that our input settings, our clip settings, our footage settings, composition settings, all match from Mocha to After Effects. So that's going to be your frame rate, your film size, and your aspect ratio. Now again, we're just going to take all of our visible layers, jump over to After Effects, we're going to drag our footage down into our comp, make sure we're on the first print frame, and go to Paste Mocha Mask. We end up with this nice mask set series on our file, and we drag our original footage underneath so that when we warp, our warp is going to be contained to our mask area. Now I'm just going to find Reflex Warp, and I'm going to drop that into my top layer, or if you want, you can find it under Reflex Warp under Revision Effects in your Effects menu. Now, you can see that the warp is a little off. This has to do with layer order. Reflex uses a very specific layer order, so your boundary needs to be at the bottom, and your to and from splines need to be in pairs. Now, clearly we've got some sort of incorrect warp going on because she's warping from the top to the bottom corner, which means our layers are out of order. So we have to find out where our layers are out of order. We can do that with a visual check. So to see how this is warping, we're just going to jump down to our layer order and we're going to see, oh, our right neck from and our right neck to are not right beside each other, so we need to drag right neck from and right neck to be in a pair again. So now our warp will work correctly. And we can play with our settings and decide how thin we want to make her face or how wide. We want to make sure that it still looks natural, so I'm going to use about 25% of a warp between the two of these. So you can see those are the results that we get. Now, that's not the only way to use open splines. What we can actually do is we can use open splines to do stroke for hair effects. Sometimes in visual effects you need to rebuild hair, like for instance in stereo work, that's a really big thing for foreground characters. When you redo the depth, you need to rebuild hair one by one. With mocha tracks, obviously that would be a lot easier. In this case, we're going to use this to color her hair. So I'm going to export my open spline data, and I'm going to bring it right over here. And in After Effects, we're going to make a new solid. I'm just going to make a pink solid right quick, and I'm going to go to Edit, Paste Mocha Mask. And then I'm going to navigate to Effect, and we're going to actually look for a stroke effect to put on top of this. So just like we would use with the pen tool, but we're not, we're using mocha masks. So we're going to look for a stroke, and then we're going to go to Generate Stroke and pull that right on top of our layer. We're going to make sure that we are on Transparent, pick a color, pick a width, okay, and we're going to stroke all masks. It's really that simple. We just want to make sure that we get the width that we want with the stroke. In this case, I'm going to make it very thick because this is a demo and I want to illustrate. We're going to use this to color her hair by just using it as a hue blend over the top. So that's some of the cool things that you can do with open splines and hair inside of Mocha. It looks really natural and it moves nicely. The last thing I want to show you is, let's say that we want to actually add a text spline to her neck, like following the path of her shoulders. We can always just take our shoulder track and alter it inside of Mocha by opening it and adjusting the points, and then exporting this right back to After Effects. And we hit Control-Shift-Alt-T to make a text layer that is the size of our comp. We go ahead and we paste our Mocha mask right on top of that. And then we apply the text to this spline just by wrapping it around the spline. Now you can see that it's not exactly how I want it, so we're just going to adjust and flip it to the other side, and we're going to go and adjust our size so that it fits on the side of her neck. Now before we wrap up, I want to show you how to do this spline warp inside of Nuke. It's a little bit different. We actually get rid of all of our two splines. We don't need them. In After Effects we need them, but inside of Nuke we don't, so we're just going to hide all of those layers and only use our from layers and our boundary layer. So these are the layers that we're going to use. We're going to go over to our Export Shape Data. Okay, so Export Shape Data, and we're going to navigate to a new export, which is going to be the Nuke Spline Warp export, and we're going to make sure that we export all visible layers, copy them in the clipboard, and go right over to Nuke. Inside of Nuke, we're going to select our footage, go to Edit, Paste. It's just a copy and paste the same way it is in After Effects. We're going to select our effect, and we're going to delete one of our boundary layers because we actually don't need both of them. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we warp one of our splines inside of Nuke. So we're going to go to Transform, and we're going to slim her face up, or fatten it, by using these settings. So I'm just adjusting the transform on skew X just to get a very quick effect, but you can use however many skew layers you want and whatever properties you want. Do whatever you think looks best. But I'm not going to slim this any more than I did in After Effects. You want to make sure with beauty work that you don't over slim your actors and actresses, or else they're going to look unreal and a little bit like Barbie dolls. So be careful when you're doing beauty work. You don't want to smooth skin too much, and you don't want to make people look too skinny. They won't look like human beings. And as you can see, we got the same type of warp that we got inside of After Effects, and you can do this in either After Effects or Nuke. It doesn't matter the tool you use, all that matters is that you get the job done. If you guys have any questions, I'm Mary Poplin from Imagine Your Systems, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching.